What is my purpose? If you're anything like me, then that might have been a very big question mark in your life. Maybe one that has plagued you for several years. Back when I was younger, I always used to think that after going to university, I would figure out what my purpose is, you know? Like, you know, surely over this few years, you know, of time specifically to figure out your life as an adult, then I will come out knowing exactly what I want to do. I had all the faith in the universe that that was going to happen. And if you're anything like me, you might already know the ending to that story, which is that, of course, that wasn't the case. I left just as unsure of what I was going to do as when I went in. Now, this might not apply to you if you're going for like a science or a medical degree or something very vocational. But if you're going into just the humanities like I did, or something to that effect, then you might know what I'm talking about. There's a concept called analysis paralysis, which essentially means that the more you overthink a situation, the more likely you are to also not do anything about it. So regarding passion, sometimes you can be lost in the weeds of your mind too much. Sometimes you can be overthinking, what is my purpose? What should I do? And because you're overthinking it so much and overanalyzing it so much, you end up not actually doing anything. And then you truly have no purpose. And the reason why we overthink this is because we're often too scared of picking the wrong thing. We don't want to double down in an area which we're going to regret later on down the line. Because we're building up such a big thing in our minds over what is our life all supposed to be about. What is the one thing that we can pour our entire soul in, our entire being into? It's a pretty heavy question. And because it's so heavy, we don't want to pour all of that energy into the wrong thing. So we end up spending years, in some cases decades, still stuck over what it truly is that we want to do. What do you truly desire? What would be your dream job? What would be your dream career? What would be your dream life's work? And sometimes you might find that you're scared to actually pick something, because once you pick something, then by default you eliminate everything else. Because in picking to go down a specific direction and then regretting it 10 years down the line, it might be too little too late. Now you're stuck doing something that wasn't truly your purpose. So the most important thing to do is to spend as much time as possible understanding what is your true purpose, and then you won't fall into that trap. The issue is that makes you fall into another trap, which is never picking anything to begin with. Because if you spend so much time obsessing and worrying over what your purpose is and too scared to pick anything, then you find yourself in a situation of paralysis. You find yourself paralyzed through your analysis. So figuring out what the right thing is can actually be a lot more simple than we make it. And I'll get into that in a sec. But first I'm going to talk a bit about why we even feel this way in the first place. So the reason why we feel this way in the first place is because we've been conditioned not to find happiness within ourselves. We've been conditioned to find happiness and fulfillment and purpose outside of ourselves. So we're constantly looking to the external world for meaning instead of looking inward, instead of looking at who we are. And we constantly try and judge and base who we are based off those external standards, because we can never feel like we're truly enough in and of ourselves. So what does this do? This creates a situation, a perfect situation for you to be completely paralyzed. So how do we actually overcome this? Very, very simple. You pick something and you do it. Simple as that. You pick one thing and you double down on that like there's no tomorrow. And what that does is free up space. It frees up space that would be lost, paralyzed, space that would be lost analyzing the pros and cons, years of your life wasted down the drain being indecisive, and instead using all of that space and all of that time to build up something that you may actually find to be your true purpose. And what is purpose anyway? Purpose, does it exist? Does it not exist? It doesn't matter. What matters is how you feel about what you're doing, and what you feel about what you're doing is, and in of itself, what the purpose is in the first place. So whatever you feel about what you're doing is the purpose behind it. The purpose of life is to live. And as long as you are living, truly living, in whatever it is that you're doing, you can find a sense of meaning and purpose behind it. You do have core principles. You have a core why inside of you that can be unearthed. Maybe it's something that you don't realize yet. Maybe you haven't explored enough and stripped back the layers to find out what really drives you. And you can do that. And it can be very rewarding when you do that, because once you do that, then you realize that you can look at every single action you take through the lens of what that why is, what that purpose is. The purpose isn't placed on an activity. It's placed on a mindset that you take into every activity you do. So the actual surface level thing isn't what's actually important. As long as you are hitting your underlying requirements for life, then you can effectively do anything as long as it doesn't actively take away from that. So the most tangible advice that I could give on this would probably be relevant to you if you're fairly young, in your teens or 20s, and that is to approach your purpose from a standpoint of ruling out what you don't want, as opposed to a standpoint of putting everything into this one idea. So what does that mean? It means that if you are anything like I was, and you're paralyzed by indecision, not knowing what to double down on because the stakes are so high, this is what you're going to spend your entire life work into, then instead of putting so much pressure on yourself to pick the one right thing, but as a result not picking anything for a very long time, what you want to do instead is to pick as much as possible any idea that feels like it might be able to be that purpose. You want to dive into it as much as possible when you're young, and dive into it hard. Do as much as you possibly can towards those ideas. And the reason why you want to do this is because you want to rule out anything that you don't actually resonate with very, very quickly. So you might have a ton of ideas, but maybe you realize that one thing after diving into it head first for a prolonged amount of time really isn't for you. And the only way you're actually going to know that isn't by sitting around analyzing it, but it's by actually doing it, getting your elbows in the mud and trying it out before seeing, whoa, this isn't anything like what I thought it would be, and I'm actually not with this at all, so and I'm gonna move on to something else. That's the mindset that can really benefit you when you're young. Now when you're older is a bit different, because when you're older, in your 30s or up, especially in your 40s, when you're middle-aged, and if you have responsibilities outside of yourself, so any responsibility you have to someone else outside of just your own general well-being, you can't really afford to do that as much. If you've got a family, if you've got kids, then you know you're going to put food on the table. You can't take risks because it's not just for yourself, you're risking them as well. So you kind of have to, at that point, just double down in whatever lane you find yourself in at that point. So if you've been going down one lane, just pick a random example out of thin air. Let's say you do, like, I don't know, let's say you're in insurance, right? And maybe you don't know if insurance is your life purpose or the thing you want to do forever. But at that point, once you're already in that lane and, you know, you have those other responsibilities, you just kind of have to double down on that, do as much as you can in that, and then anything that you can afford to do on the sides that might be able to like sort of overtake that would be great. But you can't afford to just, like, you know, jump into brand new risks with no chance or no guarantee, if that makes sense, because yeah, it's not just you that you're responsible for at that point. However, if you are young, if you still don't know what you want to do, and you don't have any real responsibilities or anyone else who's dependent on you, and the only responsibilities you have are to yourself and your own well-being, then do as much as you possibly can to dive into as many different areas of interest as possible, to rule out the things that you actually wouldn't want to do on a long-term basis, and narrow it down to things that you would be happy to stick with. When you get to the point where you're not as flexible and you don't have as much potential and the ceiling isn't as high in so many different areas, then you just need to double down on where you already are. And if you've done the work when you're younger to narrow down those options to the point where now, okay, I know I'm good at this, I know I'm good at this, I know I love this and this, and I can really excel in these specific areas, then you're in a much better position when you're older to kind of just grind it out in whichever field you decide to go into. But yeah, one thing that we're taught to do when we're young is to specify very early, and I don't think that's the best thing to do. This might go against a lot of conventional thinking, and you know, maybe in some ways I'm wrong about this, but I think when you're able to take risks, you should take as many risks as you possibly can, so you have fewer regrets in the future when it comes to this specific topic. Not take risks in like anything, but yeah, when it comes to what you want to do, you want to do as much as you want to, like go into as much interesting fields as you possibly can while you've got the chance to now. Explore as many different avenues as possible. Don't waste your youth being paralyzed. Don't waste your youth in analysis paralysis. And at the end of the day, it really isn't that serious. You know, life is supposed to be lived. The purpose of life is to live. And as long as you can find meaning and enjoyment from in the inside when you're doing any of these things that you might want to do, then that's all that really matters in the end. What the world tells you you should place meaning in, or you should be your purpose, ultimately doesn't really amount to much. What really matters is how present and in tune you are with what you're doing. And that's what you want to maximize on a day-to-day basis. So I need to jump off to get on a call in literally 2 minutes, but this is a topic I am passionate about, and I hope that you were able to glean some insight from this. If you did, or even if you didn't, please just let me know. Drop me a message or DM or comment, and yeah, let me know what you would want to hear next time. Peace.
I heard this story about a fish. He swims up to this older fish and says, "I'm trying to find this thing they call the ocean." "The ocean," says the older fish. "That's what you're in right now." "This," says the young fish, "this is water. What I want is the ocean."